Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a early impression video, and I have to say again, thank you very much to my good friend Nick, who supplied me with very generous decants over the last couple years of fragrances that he knows I do not have in my collection, just to give me a chance to talk about them. And you know, I kind of like this setup because I get to wear it once or twice, and it's like the pressure is on just to give your thoughts, because I don't have a bottle, so this is my only chance to do this type of video. And so these are early impressions, keep that in mind. But usually I feel like I get pretty close. And sometimes with scents like this, especially ones like this, where there's almost no reviews on. There was one review 5 years ago when it first came out. And today we're going to talk about a fragrance from the house of Pryn Parfums. And it's called Mogao. M-O-G-A-O. Now, a couple things I should mention just about the house in general. Just a little bit of a ramble in the beginning. This is a very tough house, I think, to dig into for a couple reasons, especially for a Westerner. Number one, the name. So this house not only has naming issues with the fragrances. For example, I just reviewed Mora the other day. This is Mogao. I've also reviewed Anthamara, Haxan, and a fragrance called Thichilla. So very hard names to remember and keep straight. And then to make matters worse, the name of the house actually changes. So, for example, it used to be Pryn, P-R-Y-N. Now I think it's Pryn, P-R-I-N. Something about copyright with the Y-N. I don't understand it. Or maybe like part of the revenue generated from P-R-Y-N goes to someone else. He doesn't get to keep it all. I don't understand it all. But he also has Strangers Perfumery, so his own separate line. And then on top of it, he has Parfums Persona. So there's Pryn, Parfums Persona, Strangers Perfumery, and then all the weird names of the fragrances. And it's like, oh, it's very hard to keep up. And then, to make matters worse, our good friend Prin Lomros is a prolific issuer of perfumes. And I have no clue how he puts out so many fragrances so fast, but he has put out a ton of work, a bunch of stuff. And sometimes it gets discontinued very quickly. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes like some travel between the houses. Like one person told me, oh, that's this name on this house, but this name on that house. And I'm like, I can't keep up. So I own basically zero from the house of Pryn. I do own Cigar Rum from Strangers Perfumery, which that's one of the fragrances I would probably sell if I ever did sell my fragrances. It's not one of my favorite DNAs, let's say. It's not a bad fragrance. It's not one of my favorite DNAs, okay? That slightly sweetened cigar. There is an interesting raisin note and a seaweed note, but it just doesn't do enough to push it over the top. It's a very likable, wearable fragrance. But on the other hand, Pryn, I've noticed his fragrances fall into a couple categories, and people kept telling me, Ramsey, stick with his fragrances. You will find some that you absolutely love, and that is true. I found some that I really liked as I continued to test them. But basically, his fragrances for his more advanced line goes in a couple routes, okay? The first route is basically the first hour is the most disgusting thing you've ever smelled in your life, okay? I mean, literally, go watch some of my reviews for things like Anthamara. I mean, I'm talking about like a toddler picking up a cat turd out of the litter box and putting it in the perfume stew, right? I mean, stuff like that. It is brutal stuff. And it's funny because people smell that and they're like, masterpiece, absolute masterpiece, brilliant, 10 out of 10. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. There does have to be some balance here between just smelling like pure shit and, you know, some sort of perfume going on underneath it, right? And so every time I spray a Pryn for the first time, I'm like bracing because I never know which one I'm gonna get. Am I gonna get the, I'm just gonna give you the most brutal, disgusting thing you've ever smelled because some people think that's art? Or am I gonna get the, okay, I'm actually going to create a fragrance here. And so luckily for Mogao, and remember, this is a guy who has a big tolerance for animalic speaking, okay? So if I'm saying this, you know some of the openings of Pryns are just absolutely brutal, right? So the opening of Mogao, luckily, this is one of the more calm Pryn creations, okay? There are some animalic notes in here, so I'll give you the note listing. Frankincense, leather, plum, resins, Sichuan pepper, costus, cumin, kumquat, which I'll tell you what, there's not very many kumquat notes in perfumery. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is in Xeryus Rouge, which I will review very soon. This is a vintage bottle. I think this is still in production. I think you can still buy this. It's just a different bottle now. Givenchy, Xeryus Rouge was created by Nick Minardo, I believe, but this has a very interesting kumquat and cactus note. So very strange fragrance for a designer, but it works. And it's a fresh fragrance too, which makes it even stranger. But kumquat, mandarin orange, orange blossom, tangerine, angelica, champaka flower, cinnamon, lapsang souchong tea, nutmeg, orange blossom, orange, osmanthus, and star anise. Okay, so let me read you the blurb to this opening, to the fragrance, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So here's the note from the brand. It says, from the faith of the great Mongoloid to the modern heritage of the world, from religious faiths to the rich heritage of ancient wisdom, all is captured into the essence of Mogao, which is named after the caves of Buddha that feature a collection of finest Buddhist art spanning over a period of over 1,000 years. Located in Gobi Desert and on the monumental spot of the Silk Road, it was here where the caravans of men crossed paths with the holiness of Buddhism, amidst the rich natural surroundings that engulf this spiritual oasis of ancient China. Mogao begins with the celebration of rich natural heritage of southwest China, Sichuan province. From a variety of aromatic sweet oranges, intoxicating osmanthus combined with Sichuan's indigenous spice and tea leaves that are picked with an attentive eye. Like the sacred content of the cave's library, enigmatic aroma of fresh ingredient tempered with the base note is set to disperse beyond boundaries. With the base note of incense, wood, and leather, we reimagine back to when the caravan gatherings came to pass by the ancient Silk Road, where merchants and people of different races met and mingled. From east to west, somewhere along the road emerged that 1001 Arabian Nights moment in the midst of the desert. There we sit, with our caravan of companions around the campfire, casually exchanging and enriching one another's culture and religious beliefs with no sense of segregation, either by nationality or border. Just a group of free-spirited voyagers from faraway lands, surrounded by the warmth of campfire and united under the same starry sky. So, a very utopian view of the world, I would say. So again, Prin Lomros is the creator from 2017, and according to Parfumo, this is discontinued. So here's the thing. This opens up very pleasant for a Prin fragrance. So those animalic notes that I mentioned, they are there. There is some costus. Costus can sometimes smell of wet dog or like wet fur or hair, right? It can also have like an earthy, dirty note to it. And there is cumin, but you notice there's no oud. And there's no civet, there's no castoreum, there's no super crazy animalic weird notes or anything like that. The costus and the cumin are also very toned down. They're there, but they're in the background, almost from the beginning. You get a little bit of funk. I just sprayed it before I did the video again, and I've been wearing it all day as my scent of the day. So I've got a dry down here, an 8-hour dry down here, and I just did a fresh spray here. And so in the beginning, it opens up very creamy, and you get that sort of fiery Sichuan pepper, right? And it opens up very fruity and floral in a way, because there's the plums and there's the kumquat note. And you get a, like I said, very deft execution of animalic. So the costus and the cumin are there, but they just add the tiniest funk. And whenever I smelled it the first time, I was like, okay, this is Prin doing more of a relaxed scent. Think of the people sitting around the campfire, right? Everyone's relaxed. No one's ready to be attacked or anything like that. Everyone's sitting around and sort of sharing stories and enjoying each other's company. And what's funny is the animalics, the way that they're done in here, they remind me a little bit of like a Serge Lutens fragrance. Honestly, if you would have like blindfolded me and said, hey, Ramsey, this is one of the Serge Lutens fragrances you've never smelled, I would have said, okay, I believe it. And I like it. I think it's really good. I think it's a good fragrance for what it is. I have no clue prices on the secondary market, by the way. I think retail, this was $200 or $300 for 30 mils. So who knows what people are trying to sell bottles of Mogal for now, if it's truly discontinued. But it's one of those fragrances that feels a little bit wacky, you know, but it works, okay? And so what ends up happening is that you get a lot of the orange notes in the beginning, and you get a lot of different shades of orange because there's multiple types of orange in here and you can feel it. So there's mandarin orange, there's orange, and then there's tangerine. And each one I feel like offers something a little bit different. You know, it's not just imagining biting into a sweet, juicy orange, right? There is a little bit of that, but it's almost like wearing those 3D glasses that they give you when you go to the movies, if you go see one of those 3D movies, and sometimes the glasses are like tinted with a color. This feels like it's tinted with orange. You know, everything you're seeing is kind of orange and glossed over with that creaminess. And that creaminess basically comes from champaca flower. Champaca is a very interesting flower. It's not used as often in mainstream perfumery, but Bortnikov did an amazing champaca oud called L'air Exquise, which I have reviewed on the channel. I would love a bottle of that one day. That's a beautiful champaca fragrance, and I've talked about others, but champaca gives this golden hue, you know, this sort of creamy golden tea-like spicy smell for a flower. And you notice there's tea in the fragrance as well. And so the orange adds this zestiness, this sort of citrusy, tropical zestiness. But the differences between the orange notes that you get are pretty interesting, because sometimes it's slightly bitter, sometimes it's slightly rindy, sometimes the orange feels a little bit green, and sometimes the fruitiness kind of comes forward and takes the reins. And the different versions just kind of play very well with the fruity notes, the plum and the kumquat, right? And plum is kind of one of those more common notes in perfumery. You think about it in things like Roche Femme, and many other fragrances have that sort of plum note in there. But this is not the decadent, sort of dripping, sexualized plum that I imagine when I smell Roche Femme. This is a little more like a ripe plum. You know, it's ripe. Like it's not ready to really be bitten into yet. There's something a little bit ripe about it, and you add to that kumquat note, which is interesting because kumquat is mostly extracted through the rind, but it can also be extracted through these little white flowers, apparently, on the vine of whatever plant the kumquat grows on. I can't say I'm a specialist in kumquat here, but it's supposed to produce a fragrance that is more complex than just an orange note. So we already have 3 types of oranges. Now you add that kumquat note, which basically gives you this sort of sweet and sour, or sweet and tart combination, because the skin of the kumquat is actually sweet, and apparently you're supposed to eat kumquats whole with the skin on it, and the inside is tart. So it's like a sweet and tart combination mixed with the orange notes that I mentioned earlier. And the osmanthus, which usually adds this sort of suede, like you know, almost nectarine feel, but slightly, sometimes it can have leathery aspects or suede-like aspects. Here, it's interesting because from the note breakdown, the way that the notes hit my nose, at least off of my skin, I tend to get a lot of this peach-like smell in the opening, and that has to be the osmanthus. There's no peach in here. But early on in the fragrance breakdown, I get more peach, and later on, as it, you know, starts to sit on my skin, more of that plum starts to come through, that ripened plum. And the osmanthus, I've heard some people refer to it as like a balloon, like a plasticky balloon smell. And here it almost feels like a tarp. I know that sounds weird, but I just get the image of a tarp, like you just putting a tarp down inside of a cave. And maybe that's the copy actually working on me, but you know, it does give that impression. Like, imagine unrolling a big tarp, a blue tarp, like the color of my shirt, right? Just unrolling it for people to sit on. There's a weird feeling like that from I guess it's from the osmanthus. That's my guess. And if you break the fragrance down in parts, it's interesting, because obviously the uplifting notes come in the top. There's also that angelica note, which I really glossed over, but angelica is a beautiful note, and it adds a little bit of this green shade to the otherwise orange glasses I talked about earlier. And what hits your nose early, if you go back to the beginning, is that Sichuan pepper. And the Sichuan pepper is not like a regular pepper. It actually adds this fiery red feel to a fragrance. Like, and maybe that's the campfire. Maybe he was trying to use Sichuan pepper as like the campfire smell. And actually, a perfect example of a Sichuan pepper note and color is this. This is Journey Man by Amouage, and this is a perfect sort of representation of Sichuan pepper to me, this fiery red, and it's a brilliant perfume. I'll review this one of these days. But yeah, Sichuan pepper is more fiery smelling to me. And so it does bring images of people maybe sitting around a fire. And then what ends up hitting your nose is that Lapsang Souchong tea, which is interesting because it's a smoky type of tea. And so you just imagine everyone sitting around the fire, drinking tea, telling stories. And there's actually a funny story of how Lapsang Souchong tea got started that Rich Mitch shared with me. He sent me a history of the world seen through the eyes of like tea development, which is a crazy podcast or a crazy idea for a podcast, but it just works because you think about how tea has influenced the world over the years. And Lapsang tea, basically, if I recall the story correctly, because I'm going off of memory here, which is always dangerous, but I think what ended up happening is a bunch of smugglers were somehow trying to get tea through an area maybe they weren't supposed to, or, you know, maybe it was like banned, or they didn't want to pay the tariffs or something like that, right? Where they were worried they were about to get busted, so they buried the tea and they covered it up with pine needles or whatever it was, and to stop themselves from getting caught, they set the tea on fire. And then they were like, oh shit, the boss is going to kill us because we're not going to have the money because we didn't sell the tea. So after it burned, they went back and got the tea and they were like, screw it, let's sell it to these stupid Europeans, probably the British. They drink the most tea. They were like, probably let's sell it to the British. Who cares? Let's get our money. We'll never deal with them again, right? So they sold the tea off, and expecting never to hear from those people again because they were like, who the hell wants to drink burnt tea that was buried underground? And the people called them back almost instantly and said, we want more. We want more of that smoky tea. How did you do it? Where did you get it? And that's basically how it was born. That's the story I recall. I could be completely off and made that up, but I don't think I did. I think I recall hearing that on one of the podcasts Rich Mitch shared with me. But it's interesting because Lapsang does have that smokiness. Obviously, it's famous for the smokiness. It's also very famous for having this liqueur-like vibe, almost like a peaty smell, like a mossy, peaty, liqueur-like feeling, which also adds to the sitting around a campfire. You can almost imagine people passing on around maybe some sort of liqueur. And the other thing that it's very known for is having that pine or pine wood smell, because I think maybe the story was like they put pine needles on top of the fire when they burned it. I have no clue how it really came about, but I think that's the story that I heard. So there's this interesting smoky, leathery, slightly animalic thing in the background, and you know, this is sort of the this is the opposite of those fragrances where he just wants to grab you with that dirty animalic smell, which I really don't like those fragrances from him. You know, and I love animalic fragrances, but I really don't like how Pryn does animalics. And that creamy champaka really lasts throughout the life of the scent. It really feels like a creamy scent throughout from start to the end. And, you know, in the beginning, you get more of the orange touches from the 3D glasses, like I said earlier, and then you take those off as the fragrance goes along because you're meeting more people and drinking the smoky tea and all that stuff, right? And the pine touches come in, the green from the angelica, the weird tarp smell from the osmanthus, and finally there's this sort of incense bit that comes forward. And the incense, I don't really know where it comes from, but you know, obviously there's frankincense in here, so that's probably where it comes from. But I heard that Lapsang tea can also have a slightly smoky, incensey quality to it as well. So there's multiple parts there where you could be getting the incense, and it kind of does smell like you're in a cave structure, like you're in an enclosed area and someone lit incense like way off, and you know, it's just floating through the cave because the cave is enclosed. You know, there is a little bit of that feel to this. And the other thing is, if you go back to the copy, he makes a mention of a oasis in ancient China, engulfed this spiritual oasis of ancient China. And there is this sort of relaxing oasis, you know, this very chill, calming feel to this fragrance. It's the type of work that I think Pryn does much better than when he's trying to use those animalics and shock people. I think it takes more to have a masterpiece than just a shitty, shocking opening. And some of his fragrances, if you want to laugh, go watch my reviews on Pryn. I've got an entire playlist that you can go check out if you want to hear about some of the other ones. But none of them have really moved me to go, man, I need a bottle of that. Like, you know, when I smelled some of Russian Adam work or Ensar's work or Bortnikov's work or his fragrances, you know, I would put him sort of one notch below some of those artisanal creators. And I think he falls into that artisanal house because he uses things like real oud and you know, rare and hard to find ingredients and stuff like that. I don't know if he uses real sandalwood or if it's synthetic or what, but you know, his brand is run more like an artisanal house, but very little have I smelled. You know, cigar rum was a blind buy. So I've never smelled a Prin fragrance that's made me go, damn it, I need a bottle of that. It just has never happened. Sometimes I'm like, disgusting. Other times I'm like, you know, it's not too bad. But never has he created something that just grabs me, you know? Never has he created something where I'm like, man, this is like a must buy for me. I have to buy this no matter what. I need a bottle of this. Never, never. I appreciate Nick sharing the work. Otherwise, I'd never be able to do these videos. There's not very many videos on this stuff anyways. So I think it's kind of cool that I get to do these videos, although they probably won't get the clicks of other videos. But, you know, that's beyond the point. I think that's part of one of my favorite parts of running the channel the way I want to run it, is I can do whatever I want. Even if only a couple hundred people watch the video, so what? Doesn't matter to me. But at least I've got my thoughts out there. I have enjoyed wearing it today, so there is that. And there are more Prins on the list to discuss. And I'll show you right here. They're right here. I believe Ajay sent these to me. This is Homa, which, oh God, this is, Homa is the opposite of the one we're talking about today. This is disgusting in the first hour. And I wore that to bed once the other day, and I was like, oh my God, what a mistake. That stuff is harsh, harsh opening. It gets better, but harsh. Ganja Kasturi is another one. And finally, we have Varuek. Varuek is on fire. I think this is the Castorium one, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, more Prin work to come on the channel. If you have experience with the house of Pryn Parfum or Parfum Persona or Prin or Strangers or whatever it is, do leave a comment. Let me know what you think. You know, thanks for watching. I always appreciate the feedback, the back and forth. Thanks to everyone who likes the videos and all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys next time. Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.